Yeah. Thanks for doing this, and thank you for sitting here to hear me out as I speak to one. I speak to hundreds. I just want people to hear these amazing stories. And so I'm Anthony Brogdon. I'm a historian here in Detroit. I'm an author of a book titled Black Business Book. I am the filmmaker of a documentary titled Business in the Black. Both of them examine the rise of black business in America, taking you back to the 1800s. And then also, I'm the host of a podcast titled Strong Inspirations. And on my show, I interview people around the world to tell Black history stories. And to date, I probably have close to over 500 videos. We just celebrated 3 years of doing the show this past Thursday. And it's been my passion to do a lot of different activities. And this Black history, it just kind of came by happenstance. I didn't go to school to study it, but I love it. I love hearing, and my angle is what I like to call good Black history. When Black people win, of our achievements, of our successes, of our stories of our resilience and tenacity, glorious stories. And we all know some of them. But I think what has happened is so much of it is not taught in schools. And because I didn't know some of the things that I'm going to talk about. And what is taught is taught by the hunter, by the oppressor, by those who want to glorify that angle and not tell how we overcame some of those things. And so that's the part that I want to tell. And it's I think sometimes difficult people to understand that there's another side of the coin because that time period was just not black and white. It wasn't just this is the way it was all the time for everybody. And there were a number of examples of, let's say, enslavers who did not mistreat their people as bad as others. Let's put it that way. And there were instances where enslaved black people were able to get some advantages in life and use those to their benefit. And so that's what I like to talk about. And in particular, I like to talk about it from the perspective of black business owners who, during that time period, owned businesses. It's a little known fact that that was going on. And it was a lot of it was under the approval of their enslaver that they were able to own the business. And now let me say, when I say they owned the business, it wasn't that they had a business card as they do today. It wasn't that they paid taxes and under the normal sense of a business. But what it was not all the enslavers were farmers. That's one of the misnomers. That they all grew cotton, or that they all harvest rice, or they all harvest tobacco. Thank you for coming. And that they all, you know, did those kind of farming techniques. Some of them were the carpenters. Somebody had to build the homes. And so, as a result of someone having to do that, they still used African American black people for free labor to conduct those operations. And so, give you an example, there was a guy by the name of Frank McHorter. And I like talking about this guy, Frank McHorter. And she's heard me say him quite a few times. Frank McHorter was born in 1777. His enslaver was the carpenter. And what he would do is he charged people to build their home. So let's say if he charged $1,000 or $2,000, he would allow Frank to keep some of the money because Frank did most of the work. And what would happen is Frank and people like him got so good that they actually operated the business on behalf of the enslaved. They would go out and collect the money. They would go out and estimate the job, go out and figure out what materials they need on that person's bequest. And so they gained all these skills, these entrepreneurial business skills. And if I allowed you to gain those skills, that meant that I didn't have to do it, and I could expand my business operations. And so with Frank McWhorter, he got so proficient at it and did so well that he had enough money to buy his freedom. The gentleman allowed him to do that. He not only bought his freedom, he bought the freedom of 18 other people. Let's say Frank might have lived to about the age of 40 or something like that. So this is, he might have died in 1820. But he got so proficient and so successful in helping run that business, he bought his freedom, the freedom of 18 other people. Then he moved from that plantation and ended up buying land in Illinois. And he named his land, he incorporated it, New Philadelphia, Illinois. So he's considered the first black person to incorporate their own township. And because he did that, he became the mayor. I'm going to be the mayor of this town. But what he did was when he bought the land, then the people who came to move on the land had to pay him some money for the land that they moved on. That's ingenious at that time period. And so it's a unique story of how someone could come from under those circumstances and and be able to be successful in business operations. Now, one of the first businesses that black people did was they to help network among ourselves is they formed mutual associations, insurance companies is what we would call them today. Because if I could get a nickel from you, a nickel from you, a nickel from you, and kind of build a base, and then I would take those nickels and then use it for the benefit of the people who gave me a nickel, and in particular, they would use it for the benefit of burial services. So there were a number of highly successful national black-owned businesses that came out of that time period. North Carolina Mutual Insurance is one of them. Atlanta Life Insurance is another, and and so many more. Because A.G. Gaston in Birmingham, Alabama, he grew his business. He was a barber. But then he, got enough money where people come in, hey, can I borrow a little bit of money? And then they would borrow a little bit of money. And then he say, well, to pay, from that borrow, you got to give me a little interest on it. He heard that, got more money. That turned into, well, people don't have enough money to bury their loved ones. So okay, I'm going to go into the insurance agency. Not that he just went in insurance, but now he owned the funeral home. Not just that he owned the insurance and the funeral home, he ended up owning the cemetery. This is, and this gentleman here, he didn't have much education himself. I thought if I know he didn't have college. And not just that he did funeral home, cemetery, but he also owned a bank. And he also owned one of the more fabulous motels in Birmingham. It's just a unique example. There was a lady by the name of Mary Ellen Pleasant. Mary Ellen Pleasant, this is the mid 1800s, born enslaved, found a way to get enough money to buy her freedom. She moved out of the South and ends up out in the California territory area. She opens up a laundry business. Probably didn't take her much, but just the effort to say, this is what I'm going to do. Might didn't have to put in capital investment and so on and so forth. But hey, I'll clean your clothes for you, but pay me a little something for doing it. She ended up doing so well that she ended up owning a bank and many other bought a lot of land. And we could honestly say she was the first black millionaire. Now we give Madam C.J. Walker that credit because she was very flamboyant and she probably did have $1 million that they could account for in all her assets and bank and things of that sort. But there were a number of other people before her that their dollars, if equated in today's terms, would be more than $1 million. There was a guy named Stephen Smith. Stephen Smith was worth about $200,000 back in the mid 1800s. He owned a coal mine. He did coal, not a coal mine, but he did coal and he did lumber. And he grew that business. There's a lady who is a fashion designer. Her name is Elizabeth Keckley. Elizabeth Keckley, see what she did was somebody had to sew the clothes on the plantation. Put the buttons on, repair them, or something like that. Because to be an enslaver, that was not inexpensive. First of all, and this is a little known fact, the government charged the tax on the value that they estimate of the enslaved person. So they had to pay a tax, like you pay property tax. Mm-hmm. Then they had to have a place for them to stay. It could be a shack, make you build it, but still, I had to get you some clothes from somewhere. Maybe had to do something for some health care. Had to come up with some kind of food for you to eat, things of that sort. So it was not, and it was very expensive to purchase an enslaved person. That could be $2,000, depending on who the build of it, male, female, the age, and things of that sort. And so that was not an inexpensive option. So this lady, Mary Pleasant, she was the one that sold the clothes. She got so good at it that she had her own techniques, the way she put the buttons on, maybe more buttons than others, the way she noticed that clothes would wear down, over the knees or something like that, bend it down, so on and so forth. Maybe adjust the pants so they fit better to a person. That led her to actually designing dresses for the mistress of the house, the gowns and things of that sort. I'm sure she got so proficient at she added her own techniques. Got so good that now she is sought after by people throughout the community. Hey, can Mary make my dress? This is another little known fact that they don't usually talk about, is that the enslaver would allow that person, their enslaved people, not all of them, some of them, depending on what they did, to travel up north by themselves. I know where you're going. You better come back in the next 2 weeks, or we're gonna come look for you. But I'll let you go. And this is what they did with Elizabeth Keckley. She would let her come up to the Washington D.C. area and visit with clients because the word had got out. Elizabeth Keckley, you got to get your dress made by that lady. The, you know, I don't know what she did to it, so on and so forth, but it was a fabulous dress. So she would travel and she would be able to keep some of the money that she made. And I would suspect that she might have said, "Hey, I sold a dress for $100 and actually sold it for $150." I'm not sure if she took that chance, but the enslaver wasn't there. Maybe she did. So the enslaver at some point felt for her enough to say, "Okay, for a certain amount of money, you can buy your freedom. I'll give you the papers. Put it in the court records, because that's how there would be free black people in the same community as enslaved black people." There was an instance where a person can be enslaved and their wife or husband be free, living in the same house. See, because the thing about it is, we got to think, if we look at today and take it back 200 years, we are the same people. It's just a sign of the times. It's just how someone feels towards somebody. And some are more brutal than others. There's no question about it. Some had compassion for one or another person for whatever reason. And so she was able to buy her freedom. She stayed in Washington, D.C., got so well known that she became very best friends with Abraham Lincoln's wife, Mary Todd Lincoln. And Mary Todd Lincoln would consult her and talk to her and befriend her, ask her, what do you think we should do for black people, things of that sort. And she ran around the social elite of Washington, D.C. at the time. There's a guy by the name of Julius Groves. He was a potato farmer. He moved to Kansas, got his freedom, moved to Kansas. Julius Groves grew more potatoes than anybody in America in his heyday. He understood the soil that he was working with. He came up with his own farming techniques, his own special ingredients to make his potatoes tastier, bigger. And as a result, he became very wealthy. He owned the bank. He owned a grocery store in town. He started a number of associations, the Keesaw Agricultural Association, had a big house. Because the moral of it is, if I find a way, I'm going to make it work. If there's something that I can do, if I could see an opportunity. There were a number of people who had fruit stands. And because they did good customer service, people wanted to come to their fruit stand. They found the best products, had a wide variety, wide selection, worked longer hours, and became very successful at it. There's a gentleman by the name of C.R. Patterson. C.R. Patterson is born enslaved, but slavery ends. Now, when he was enslaved, he was the guy that worked on the plantation that would fix the horse and buggies. Because they would break down too. So somebody had to repair the wheels, things of that sort. That was C.R. Patterson's job. Well, he's learning along the way and getting very proficient at it. Once he gets his freedom, he goes into business, offering that service. Years later, C.R. Patterson has a son. His son goes to Central State University in Ohio. They've left the South. They've moved to a little small town not far from Central State called Greenfield, Ohio. His son is saying, I'm going to take this to the next level. And he goes into motorized cars. It's that time period. And they compete against Henry Ford. So for, I don't know, a 10-year period, maybe something like that, they're developing their own motorized cars. Well, they never got to the assembly line type concept. And Henry Ford beats them out. They don't get the financing, so on and so forth. But what they end up doing is refurbishing car parts. And so when they were motorizing the cars, it was called Greenfield Motors. It's in Greenfield, Ohio. Becomes very successful, very wealthy at this. Again, these are some amazing stories of what these people did even back during that time period. There's a guy by the name of William Leesdorf. William Leesdorf was born about the 1850s in Louisiana. His father is the enslaver. Um, William Leesdorf is allowed to work on the ship under his dad, and he probably doesn't treat him like some of the other people. He's watching and he's noticing, he's learning what's going on. And once William Leesdorf is able to get his freedom, he goes into the shipping business. Gets a little boat, grows from a little boat to a big boat, and now he's sailing up that Mississippi River along Louisiana. He leaves there and he goes to New York, becomes even more wealthier, and now it's the time period where people are going out west. So he moves out to California, and in particular, there was territory under the Mexican rule that he convinces the Mexican government to give him, maybe he purchased it, 35,000 acres, California. And this is in that San Francisco area. He becomes a political officer in the local government, school board, so on and so forth. And in many respects, he's considered the founder of San Francisco, William Leesdorf. Stories that they just don't tell you about how we overcame the circumstances of the day, the uniqueness that happened to us, that was in our lives, that maybe we were able to talk the guy into saying, hey, sir, you don't have to come in. I see what you're doing. I can count the lumber. I can do the inventory. So the guy says, okay, well, yeah, okay, save me some time. He says, but you can read and write? He says, yeah, well, can you show me a little something? So now he shows him something. And the guy is like, I'm not gonna run, it's pretty good here. And as a result of that, he becomes efficient in business operations. And these are the kind of stories that, again, a lot of times people just don't tell. Because if I had heard this back in this day, that would have really, really inspired me. Uh, because what we do talk about is, let's say, the beatdown. Mostly what we hear, the slave trade, of the civil rights era, so on and so forth. And the younger people, I think, need to hear these kind of things so that they can understand and have more of appreciation of our history. And there were a number of black inventors of that day. Granville T. Woods, he really was um, as proficient in electricity as Thomas Edison, and made some inventions and some improvements to uh, communication devices that Thomas Edison sued him, saying he overstepped his grounds, that's not his patent, things of that sort, and lost in court. And Elijah McCoy is another one, an inventor who came out of the Detroit area. He actually lived in Detroit. His cemetery plot is over on Ryan and 13 Mile. And Elijah McCoy uh, was an inventor that did a lubricating device for trains that made the oil run more efficiently, more effectively, and the trains ran better. And sure enough, people tried to duplicate his device, but they couldn't see what was inside. Couldn't figure out how he did it. And so that's why they say when they wanted one of those devices, they wanted the real McCoy. The other people tried to do that and was not effective in doing it. And there were a number of other people who did various things all throughout the years. Um, you've all heard of the Negro Baseball League? It was started by a guy named of Andrew Foster. Now, Andrew Foster, this is early 1900s. He was born in the late 1800s, but he was a pitcher. and a very good pitcher. And there were Negro baseball teams, but that played among themselves, but it was sporadically. What the schedule, things of that sort. And so these teams played among themselves, and so he worked with the owners of the Chicago White Sox and asked them to help him if he could, manage their team. Hey, thank you for coming. That grew from managing their team to, can I be the owner? Paid some money. That grew from there to actually owning the team. So then what he does is there are other Negro teams. Not all of them are owned by black people. Some are owned by white people. Hey, let's come together and form a league. And so they did. And it's called the National Baseball League. And their games were even more well attended than the white games. It was more, just more exciting, they better players or something like that. You had all the black people coming, dressing up, so on and so forth, going to the games. And you said what now?
My father played in Chicago.
Did he? Oh, okay.
He was a pitcher.
Okay. Yeah.
Over in Washington Park, over by DuSable Library.
Yes. Yes. I know exactly what you're talking about.
I grew up going over there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, there you go. They had a team here that played in Detroit, over near Hamtramck. Yeah, that's it's still there. Yeah, that's where they played here in Detroit. But Andrew Reuben Foster became quite wealthy. You know, taking a little bit from every team in the games, and they were well attended. And then, maybe about 5, 6 years later, another league springs up, the American Baseball League, I think it's called, a Negro League. And then a few years after that, they began to play each other in the World Series, in the Negro League World Series. And so that league operated for a good 20 years or more. He saw an opportunity and said, let me make the most out of this opportunity. And that's one of the things that happened back in those days. And even during slavery. And so people could say, well, how were they? There was one guy, I don't remember his name, but he was a shoe shine salesman. Shine shoes, things of that sort. He did so well that he didn't even want to buy his freedom. Because once you buy your freedom, you got to move. You can only stay there for a year. He said, I don't want to move. My clientele is too strong right here. It's all kind of amazing stories that happened during that time period. Here's a unique story. There was a lady named Hannah Elias. Hannah Elias, good-looking lady. She wasn't born enslaved because she was born at North. She's working in a brothel. She gets a gentleman who really likes her a lot. He's very wealthy. Gives her money. She takes the money and invests it in buy real estate and becomes considered America's wealthiest black woman. Well, he falls on hard times and he tries to sue her for the money back. And he loses. He lost in court. It's these amazing stories that they just don't teach us. And